पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते हरिः ओम्.
That which we call the outer world is perfect. This which we call the inner world is perfect. Each one filled with divine consciousness. Perfect comes from perfect. Take perfect from perfect. The remainder is perfect. Divine consciousness is non-dual. Anything that emerges from the divine consciousness is whole, is complete, is Purna. May peace and peace and peace be everywhere. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.
Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate.
Hello, friends. Today, I welcome you with all my heart to another episode of Purnamadah with Dr. Trupti Jain and our special guest. You'll be surprised to know that we have somebody who has pioneered Reiki in India. Yes, we have Dr. Paula Horan with us. More about her in a while. Before that, I would just introduce the show to you. So, we are here talking about series after series and episodes after episodes on real spiritual, esoteric, and past life regression experiences. We are here to talk to you about the spiritual journeys people are going through. And today is that special day. And we have a special person who will be sharing her own spiritual journey, full of mystical insights, healing, self healing, and many other things. So, aren't you all excited just like me? I am Shrija Jhawar, your anchor, and I'm with Dr. Trupti Jain, who conceptualized this show. Her profession has been very open to all of you, the viewers. She's the pioneer in past life regression. She's already run 7,000 successful cases in India, and now she is in conversation with people who are doing the same work. So I'll now introduce you to Dr. Paula Horan. Dr. Paula Horan, also Lakshmi Deshain Wangmo, is an American psychologist who's known worldwide for her numerous books, seminars, and retreats on alternative and complementary therapies, authentic forms of vibrational medicines, and integrated body mind therapeutics and emphasis on Reiki and EFT techniques. For the last years, she's focused mainly on the groundbreaking approaches to spirituality and non dual awareness. Born in America, she lived in her childhood years in Italy and Germany, completing her undergrad studies in sociology and English literature in Britain. She then achieved both her MA, focusing on dance therapy, and her PhD in psychology in San Diego, California. From 1992 through 1997, she spent much of her time with her spiritual master, Sri H.W.L. Punajaji. Yeah, or Papaji, as he was called. This was her journey in India, where she learned about karma and she integrated that in her work too. Inspired by her masters, her wish is to elicit the same joy and freedom to others through her core retreat, which is core empowerment 5-day retreat that incorporates Gyan Yoga and karma completion. That is wonderful. Another factor in Paula's life that inspired her to become an avid researcher on detoxification and rejuvenation therapies is her personal success in treating 1 uterine and 2 breast tumors with raw food diet, Reiki, and ozone therapy. 25 years ago, she became acquainted with the therapeutic effects and astonishing benefits of oxygen and its triatomic form, ozone, in regard to healing degenerative diseases and also a restorative rejuvenation therapy. Her knowledge and personal experience in this field has put her at the forefront of the quest for longevity and for sustaining peak health in an increasingly challenged environment. Hats off to you, Paula, for that wonderful achievement that you have done and actually experimented on your own self before teaching it to others. Paula's seminars and retreats are expansive, and she has many books in her, you know, achievement records. I mean, there are so many books that I can't name them all, but one of them is Empowerment Through Reiki. And as we all know, that Paula Horan is the one who actually got Reiki in India. And today I'm sitting with not one, but 2 pioneers, and both of them being my teacher. So I'm very humbled to now pass the buck to both of them. And we cannot wait for that interesting conversation that is going to take place between two healers. Thank you, Paula, for being with us.
Thank you, Shrija, and welcome, Paula. It's truly an honor. And I am so excited, just like Shrija, to hear your journey through your own experiences. Uh, I didn't know that you're a psychologist also, so I'm keen to know, being a psychologist myself, uh, when and how did you decide that uh, energy work is something that's more powerful than just, cognitive work? So can you tell us something on that?
Yeah, sure. Like when I was in university, in the early 70s in England, I lived with an amazing group of people. They were Druids, and they introduced me to Wilhelm Reich's work. Orgone
Yes.
Orgone energy.
Orgone
I mean,
energy.
so like when I was like 20 years old, I was sitting in orgone energy boxes,
Yeah.
and things like that. And so I also heard at that time about the Royal Rife frequencies from the turn of the last century. And I became very intrigued, so at a very young age, with the whole frequency thing. And also, of course, because of the people I was living with, I learned about all the corruption in the world and how all these wonderful things had been suppressed in America. So, it's like all these, like Royal Rife, I mean, 100 years ago, he created the precursor of the super electronic microscope, and where he could actually measure the frequency of someone's disease. And then he created a machine that would put out the opposite of that. He could heal tumors overnight. He could heal, a kidney stone overnight. All these things very easily with frequencies. So even before I even knew about Reiki, I knew about these sorts of frequencies. And so I realized at that time that the real future of medicine is in frequency healing, not in chemical medicine, that this is killing the earth. I saw that in the 70s already. And no more than now, even. Well, now more, actually, because you can see.
Yes.
I did a podcast with some friends recently about how to heal the microbiome of the humans and the planet. And this is the crucial part of that is to end the use of chemical medicine and chemical agriculture. This is what's killing the whole planet.
True.
And so, yeah, it's like frequency. But the thing is we have purposely not been taught about frequencies. There's a study called magnetobiology,
Mhm.
And if you go on Amazon and you look up that, that phrase, you'll only find 2 books written by one not German, but Russian author. And I first became acquainted about 3 years ago with the work of American scientist Joe Embriano, and he talks about that, how basically the entire planet all universities have been kept from learning about magnetobiology. Doctors don't know anything about it. So that's why they don't know that the real cause of the illness today is actually 5G, not some virus. Okay. And this is being kept hidden from humanity, unfortunately, right now. But it's all about frequencies. So you can use frequencies in a positive way, and you can also use them in a negative way.
True, absolutely, absolutely true. So then, Paula, how did your journey begin? As far as Reiki went, so how did that enter your life?
Good question. Well, when Reiki entered my life when I was already working on my PhD in psychology, and one of my professors had opened a body-mind institute called the Institute for Psychostructural Balancing, and so and this was really big at the time when I was working on my doctorate. A lot of people especially in California, was like this forefront of taking all the wisdom of the East and bringing it bringing it up to date and so on. And so at the time, I had attended his institute on the side as a part of my studies. I became so fascinated with all the different forms of body work. So I learned something like the Gates method by Barry Green, which is a combination of, he would train us basically to look at the body, someone's body, see where all the emotions are stored, and then which acupressure points we would need to press to bring those karmic memories out. And this would be interesting to you because, a lot of times, for example, past life memories come out when you do that kind of work. And then, so I did years of that work. Plus, what are some of then body electronics. I learned John Ray's work, where we had to do a whole study for 1 week of, iridology. In other words, we looked at thousands of eyes, and then we learned how to analyze eyes and see the left eye records all the weaknesses of our mother that we've taken on genetically, and the right eye recognizes, has the father's weaknesses. So, for example, in my own body at the time, because my grandmother died of diabetes, and every other generation of females on her side would get diabetes. So I knew I was a candidate. But by seeing, and sure enough, there was a weakness there was a closed lesion in the pancreas point, which of course corresponds to diabetes, right? And so by having someone hold that pancreas point in my toe until it burnt through, literally it burnt, and their thumb that was holding it burnt. Then if you would have looked in my eye at that time, you would have seen that closed lesion open up. And so what that did, in effect, was change my genetic structure. So if I had had a child after that, I wouldn't have carried that weakness to my child. So, the stuff that we're only hearing from now from Bruce Lipton, I learned way back, in the 80s from John Ray. So, so that was another form of body work. And then, of course, another one I want to just touch on briefly is Chuaka, which is what the ancient Mongolians would do to themselves around the campfire when they came out of battle, and, they would have seen, horrors during the day, obviously. And so what they would do is they do this deep, to the bone massage. They do their entire skeleton. And this would bring up all their fear from the day so that it would be felt, processed, and let go of. So that when they went into the battle the next day, they were absolutely fearless. That's why they were the most fearless warriors on our planet. And their genetic structure is in everyone, all the way to Europe and India. We have so many of us have Mongolian blood.
Absolutely, Paula. And possibly that's why it's said that the physical body can never lie. If you just focus on the physical body, on the soma, on the kind of somatic memories, because that's where the memories are stored, and you press the correct point, the correct place where the memory is stored, it can just start coming up. And that's exactly what all these wonderful researchers have been
Right.
working on. Fantastic, Paula. Yeah. So when did you come to India, Paula?
Well, I came to India first time in 1989, and I came with a German student of mine. I was training as a Reiki Master, and he was training me in the fire walk. And he had
Okay.
become, and he to lead fire walks, right? And he was very connected with the forum leaders in India. And so he came, and it's interesting, to lead a past life regression workshop. And I came with him, but as a participant in his workshop, yeah. And so I became close friends with a lot of the people that were in the class with me. And they would ask me, well, what do you do? And I said, well, I teach Reiki. And well, what's that? And I said, well, it's used for all kinds of things, but, it helps you relax, da, 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 da. And, and it was so interesting because, in 1989 in India, it's like already in America, there was a lot of stress. And I said, people are using it for stress. And people would look at me like, what's stress? Can you imagine India before stress? It was so
There was
delightful.
a time like that. I really wonder.
You were very small at that time. Exactly.
But it was so charming, and I fell in love with India. It was like, oh my God, people are very more civilized here. They're not spazzed out on all this nonsense, and I was like, whoa, I want to. But I didn't. Unfortunately, though, I didn't make it back to India until 1992. But that was a powerful short meeting or short visit in India because I got to see Osho and also Sai Baba, which was interesting at that time.
Fantastic.
Yeah, both of them, yeah. And then when I came back, then in 92, I got to meet UG Krishnamurti.
Okay.
And then my real guru, Papaji, 3 months later.
Wonderful. I didn't know you met UG Krishnamurti.
Amazing,
UGK has been my guru.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. That's an interesting conversation to have because my father and UGK were friends.
Oh my.
Yeah, wow. And he lived very close by to where I used to live, and every weekend my dad used to go and he used to kind of tag me along. I was very young at that time, and I have met you. I mean, I've sat with UG and heard his crazy stuff also, because he was a crazy guru. And
I love that.
Yeah, and he was amazing. So so that kind of binds the two of us together. We can spend hours talking about UGK. So that's interesting, lovely. And how did your guru appear? Well, because they say that when the student is ready, the master appears. So you must have been ready.
Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you a story that leads up to this. See, when I was about 5 years old, 4 or 5, it was a difficult time, I think, in my parents' life. And I used to have these dreams every night of being swallowed by a whale. And I would meet this old man in the whale. And I think this may have been spurred on by watching probably the Pinocchio movie, where, Pinocchio gets swallowed by a whale. And I think he meets Geppetto in the whale or something like that. But who I was actually meeting was Ramana Maharshi. And I didn't know this until I met my guru Papaji in 1992. I had a boyfriend at the time who was very close friends with the woman who became Gangaji, one of the close disciples of Papaji, who's given satsang all over the world. And her husband Eli and we had the same students in Germany and Hungary. We had never met, three of it until this day. We've never met, actually. But we knew of each other. And but what happened was when Papaji was Eli's guru, but when he went with Tony's the one who really woke up in Papaji's presence. And so, Ken, my friend Ken at the time, he said, you must go meet Papaji. When you're in India the next time, you've got to go, whatever you do. And so I did. I went up to Lucknow. That was in 92, towards the end of my visit to India. I think I spent about 3 months here teaching Reiki all over the place. And see, I met Yuji first, and I had some magical experience we can talk about later,
Yeah.
But then at the end, I met Papaji, and it was a very, very special meeting. It's like I went the first day, and I was not, to be honest, so liking the environment because I went with an Indian friend. And in the meantime, what had happened apparently is that Osho had passed away. And one of the disciples had really woken up in Papaji's presence, and that sent a rush of the Osho sannyasins there. And so when I got there in 92, it was like being run like the Osho ashram I'd experienced in 89. And by the way, I loved Osho. I had a very magical experience with him too.
I'm sure.
But I was not so fond of the ashram itself and the people there. I found them to be a bit, a lot of spiritual arrogance, you could say, which turned me off. And they were kind of like when I went with my Indian friend, this woman from Mumbai, I felt this animosity towards her and energy, and she could feel it too, you know, and I was really pissed about it. And so I almost didn't go back, to be honest. I was turned off by it. And so my friend's husband was flying in that morning, so she didn't come with me, but I decided to go anyway, as he had suggested. I was curious because he told me some great stories about him, and you know, this guy's a real master and you don't want to miss your chance. So okay, I'm going to go. So it was amazing. You know, I wrote a letter, and in the letter I wrote, in this life, I really, really want to wake up, but I know I have tremendous resistance. You know, I can see my own mind. And so he crossed out, you know, I have tremendous resistance. And he put and said, what does this say? Well, I said, I really want to wake up in this life. And then he looked in my eyes and he said, what do you need? And see, there's a context for that question. You say you want to know my inside. So I'll tell you a little story. So it brings it up.
Yeah.
I had a very intellectual father who was immense a genius, who brought me up, you know, debating him in religion and politics when I was like 9. And I wasn't interested. I'm more a Buddha body type person where I like the big perspective. I'm not into all the details, but anyway, he was so controlling in that regard. I guess I had paranoia about being controlled by men. So I could always say, I love you, but I could never say, I need you. That made me feel too vulnerable, you see? And I'd have an epiphany just 6 months before I met Papaji, when I had to go back and see this Icelander I'd already married. And I couldn't understand why, because I knew we were complete. But when I met him, it came to me that I had not been able to say to him, I need you. And so then when I met Papaji, just right after that, right? What's the question he asked me? What do you need? Pointing to my vulnerable weak spot, right? And you know, and I honestly didn't realize that I was looking for Guru, because I'd actually just finished an amazing experience. I went and lived in a Gurdjieff style community in Vancouver, BC, just in the early 90s. And but there was a real weakness in the leader of this group. He hadn't dealt with his daddy stuff, I call it. And so eventually I had to leave, and I was so disappointed with some of the stuff I'd been through there. I mean, I'm actually grateful to the group because I learned tremendous amount. My God, I processed so much from that, working with them. They were ballistic about wanting to wake up. They had the same fervor for enlightenment that I do.
Right.
And so I honor them for that. But the leader had some serious issues. So I was just so disappointed with my experience. I was feeling like writing a book called The End of the Age of Gurus. You know? Right. So here, and then I meet Papaji, right? And I'd already had a nice visit with Yuji. And, but, you know, it's like when he asked me that question, what do you need? So I really went deep inside my heart, and I thought, and I looked in his eyes and I said, you know, and it brings me tears of eyes when I remember it. I said, you know, I need you. And I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
That was really something.
I mean, I can feel that sense of devotion and that deep desire.
Yeah.
You know, to have a guru is so strong.
And
I
I
was so
also,
serious.
I could also see the struggle to open up, to struggle to accept your own vulnerability.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Wow.
And see, this is one thing people miss, you know, it's like only if you're really serious do you really need a guru, because, you know, the thing is that most people I feel who are really ready to wake up and have that fervor like I do, you have to be somewhat mature being.
Yes.
And here's the thing, when you're a mature being, you also have a damn tricky ego. You know, you've been around the block a million lifetimes, right?
Yes, true.
So the ego is all too clever, you know, at sidestepping where you need to go.
Yeah.
And fortunately, I'm the kind of person where I dive into my fears and all this and blah, blah, blah. But, you know, hey, you know, I know how clever egos can be, especially
Yeah.
having the father I had. So, you know, and yeah, he was just like the most perfect guru for me, Papaji. And it's really due to him. And I feel it was Reiki, you know, is what brought me to Papaji, because, you know, I was doing multitasking before that was even a phrase. And, you know, because doing so many things at once all the time. And it was only after I did Reiki that all of a sudden I calmed down and I could really, you know, experience stillness and silence. And I feel that it's because of that practice of Reiki that I was able to recognize Papaji for what he was, not who he was, but what he was, which was a fully realized Buddha. He was that. He truly was that. And wow, you know, it's like,
Wow. I mean, when you talk of your guru, you get so emotional, no?
yeah, I'm a very
It's-
emotional being.
No, I think that's because the relationship is such an emotional relationship.
It is.
It's such a heart-to-heart kind of relationship, which is
Absolutely. He is my heart. You know,
Yeah.
what people get from me, it has nothing to do with Paula Horan. It's all from Papaji.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, and I think that makes you when you teach with so much of gratefulness.
Yeah, I
Absolutely.
Just, exactly.
Yeah.
So I would
That's
like
the
to,
reason.
as
Yeah.
she was talking about Reiki, I remember that time, I think I did the workshop when Trump was running for elections for the first time.
Wow.
She had absolutely predicted it in the workshop itself, and it was very interesting the way she took it. You took all of us in it. It was intellectual and then it was very spiritual too. And when she was attuning me, I still remember feeling that beautiful sensation within me, and which I cannot forget. So, you know, I was waiting for Paula to come back for, you know, the advanced courses. But yes, her Reiki was magical. And I would like to really know your journey with Reiki and how did you bring it in India and how the acceptance came in for it?
Right. And when you say that your empowerment was Reiki, one of the reasons that I want to just address that for a minute, because I was invited as a keynote speaker just over a month ago to Pune to the, what is it, the Reiki Alliance or Reiki, whatever, some committee. And one thing that I feel, you know, it's not that I'm unique, it's simply that I took the time to practice Reiki, you know, a lot before I did third degree. And what I feel even changed probably my empowerments later in a profound way was really going into the emptiness with my guru. And I was already in it. I know that before I met him too, but he really made it. I don't know how to describe it, but basically to give a good empowerment as a Reiki master, you need to be able to step the ego aside so that you are absolutely totally empty, so you can mirror that person in emptiness. And that's what makes a real empowerment an empowerment. And most people teaching Reiki have never worked to get that. And this is also, by the way, why I require that anybody training with me as a Reiki master has to do my core empowerment retreat 3 times, because it takes away, it's all about dropping all identification with the ego and completing a lot of karma, all of our desire and resistance. And it's just so important to empty yourself out before you can help another, you know.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think that
is a very profound
Dr. Jain would agree with.
statement.
Yes.
Getting empty to help others, and which is also very difficult for most people to understand, because the word emptiness is not understood by many people.
Right. It brings sheer terror to the ego.
Yes. Yes.
Because because it's like this, emptiness equals bliss, right?
Yes.
Bliss equals emptiness. And the thing is, you have to ask yourself, I always say to my students, like, think of the times when you were truly in bliss, like watching a beautiful rainbow, the birth of a baby, watching someone you love get married, things like that. In fact, I watched this incredible marriage last night. It was literally a trip. I was like, whoa. So being in that awe, and it's when you're there, and is there ego? Is ego present when you're in awe and you're in wonderment?
No, not at all.
And the thing is, ego does not want to be there. So it's going to fight and scream to resist everything to do with you waking up. Yeah.
So Paula, when Reiki started off and then you met Guruji, your own guru, how did it gain momentum? I mean, how did your journey gain momentum?
Well, as I say, I was starting to tell you about the body work that I learned because I was teaching in that, learning and teaching in that institute when this woman by the name of Kate Nani came to offer sample Reiki treatments. And at the time, I was, as I say, I was doing all this deep tissue work to make profound changes in the mind. So I mindset, well, to make profound change, to really bring the karma out and so on, you've got to do deep tissue work. And she was giving this simple laying on of hands thing called Reiki. And so I have to say I was initially skeptical to the idea, if it's not involving deep tissue, I mean, what's it going to do? This was my concept at the time.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I'm always open to new things, so I thought, hey, I'll give it a go. She's offering free treatment. I'll do a 20-minute deal. So I have to say I was very impressed because I could literally feel the energy moving in my meridians, literally, when she started putting her hands on me. And she is a very unusual being anyway, this woman who was my own Reiki master. Her name is Kate. She's from England. She was actually, we have a similar background in some ways in that she was a ballerina with the Royal Ballet in London. Oh, and wow. I studied ballet and I was a jazz dancer at one point professionally when I was young. So we were both dancers. We had this in common. And then we became healers and learned body work. Because when she came to New York, she learned body work. And someone told her, wow, you have such powerful Reiki hands. She didn't know what Reiki was. And so she started asking around, and then she got curious, and like me, she decided to take a class. So anyway, I took this sample treatment. I was so impressed. I thought, I'm going to take a class, do first degree. And everything changed because I was putting myself through graduate school as a body worker, doing body work. Although great body work I was learning from my professor, I was doing on people. And I also learned the mundane stuff like in Swedish and Esalen and all that sort of thing too, to help joints and all these things. But what really turned me on is my very first treatment that I gave was to a friend who was a painter who had no inspiration for almost 6 months, and she was really depressed. And so I gave her, I had just started doing, I would do Reiki on the front, then the body work, turn them over, finish the body work, and then finish with Reiki. And she called me up the next morning after her treatment, and she said, Paula, what was that? What was that? Reiki? What was that you did on me last night? She said, I don't know what it was, but it really had an incredible effect on me. She says, I went home, after you left, I did a whole entire sketch. And I was up all night. I did a third of a painting, and it's just amazing. I had this huge energy block that just broke open. I mean, it's like, and everything's just streaming through me again. It's amazing. He says, I want to learn that stuff. And it's so interesting because over the years, I've had a few artists, friends, who then did trades. Instead of receiving money from them, I got art from beautiful artwork. So grateful artist friends who just felt their channels open, into total emptiness, woo, and everything flooding in. So,
wow.
yeah.
So when which was your first batch where you taught Reiki? Do you remember?
Yeah, and you know what's really a trip? My first batch was in Los Angeles, of all places, at one of Shirley MacLaine's best friends. Her name was Anne Marie Benstrom. She was the leader of a place called the Ashram, which was actually a spa.
Oh, a spa.
Which all the Hollywood elite would hang out with. And so I taught some of her friends, and I just missed meeting Shirley MacLaine, who I was really at the time very impressed with, because I don't know if you remember, but in the 80s, she wrote some amazing books.
Yes, she did.
About her trip in South America and all these things and blah, blah. And I had read them and I thought, oh my gosh, I want to meet her. And I had also gone to Peru and had amazing experience.
Right. So my God, how many places have you traveled so far, teaching Reiki, learning new things? I mean, all over the world, I guess you've been traveling.
Yeah. Well, what happened was, you know, about the time, it was right at the end of getting my doctorate in psychology that I learned Reiki. Much more profound changes in 2 days from Reiki 1 than I spent in 4 years doing my doctorate. So I said, you know, what's the point? I should just teach Reiki. So I gave up my apartment, put everything in storage in a garage in San Diego. And for the next 7 years, I traveled all over the world nonstop. And my sisters in California were my base in California. And my father was still living in Europe at the time, in Germany. And so I traveled all over teaching because I speak fluent German. So I taught a lot actually in Germany in the beginning. And it was with one of my German students that I first came to India in 89. Yeah, and that's when I taught that first Reiki class here in India. And I told him, I said, only 24 people and 32 showed up. So I was like, and then 2 of the people from that class were then trained by my own German students, 2 of them, before I was able to make it back to India in 92. And in 92, that's when I met Yuji, and then I met Papaji. And then from then on, I stayed in India pretty much.
Asato ma sadgamaya tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityorma amritam gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.